Okay, so we're here with Susan Murray, and we're going to be discussing relationships, how to have healthy relationships, and what it means to have a healthy relationship. I'll let Susan introduce herself a little bit, tell us about what she does and who she is, and a little bit about her background. And we're both good friends, so we've talked about this before, and we work in some ministries that deal with relationships as well. So introduce yourself to us a little bit, Susan, and then we'll start our discussion.
Okay, well, I'm Susan Murray. Legally, I'm Susan Smart. I grew up here in the mid-Missouri area, and I was a farm girl, and so that's why I majored in French, to get away from here. Went to France, didn't like France either, came back, and as my kids were getting older, I recognized that to understand how to do relationship, I was going to have to learn how to teach them to be healthy people. And so my interest in relationships and people and needs that people have, how to do healthy relationships, those got more and more important to me. And that kind of led then, when I went back to graduate school, counseling psychology became my focus. And so 7 years later, I'm a psychologist.
So excellent. So you work with clients here in the mid-Missouri area?
I do.
Excellent.
Yeah, I work with whoever wants to work with me.
Okay.
Yeah, my kids are gone from home. They're all independent and healthy, and obviously I did something well.
Good. So our topic today is talking about healthy relationships. And obviously you see a lot of people here, and you obviously deal with a big portion of that is the health of their relationships.
Yes.
Tell us, what do you see as being some of the critical components of having a healthy relationship?
A healthy relationship fundamentally comes down to, do I understand how people need to be loved, how I need to be loved, how others need to be loved? What does that mean? How do we know, like when Jesus said the first commandment was to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then the second commandment he added was to love my neighbor as I love myself. And he said if we fulfill those two laws, then we're fulfilling all the laws and the commandments. And so love is a big deal. Just loving God first, letting pleasing Him be my first priority. And that means, things like telling the truth, or not being mean to somebody, being kind to somebody, not trying to be selfish, but just doing what's right. Yeah.
There's the avoidance of evil, but how do a lot of relationships, it's not really necessarily a conflict of people doing really wicked things to one another. It's usually a disillusion on different levels. So you talked a little bit about loving yourself. How does loving yourself come into a role in a relationship? Because that seems like a selfish maneuver rather than a healthy maneuver.
Well, it seems selfish, and a lot of times Christians think that it is a selfish thing to love myself. But if we only focus on loving other people, we run ourselves empty. We just work for other people or for other causes. And if we're not aware of our own needs, then we're not telling anybody what we need. And unless we're with people who can read our minds, then we're going to find ourselves empty. And that then leads to exhausted, and that can go into bitter or totally frustrated.
So it's not
life.
A long-term strategy to just give from thinking that you have a endless.
I used to think that I had to just be the giver, and I had to just do for whoever needed something at the moment. And a lot of people have that impression. And the problem with that is sometimes we just run ourselves empty, but other times also we find ourselves being tricked by people who want to just use us. And sometimes it's to use us to get them what they want, kind of an easy way for them to get their needs met. Sometimes it's helping them sin, like somebody who wants somebody else to pay their bills, or wants somebody to be okay with them using drugs or alcohol or sex addiction.
Mm-hmm.
People want to use whatever will give
them. Does it
them.
ultimately kind of ring on authentic as well? I mean, that you're not really loving from yourself to be able to, sort of say that I'm a superhuman, can just give without ever having any response or needs myself. Eventually it runs dry, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And why would Jesus have said, love your neighbor as you love yourself, if he didn't intend for us also to be prioritizing our own needs?
So what are some things that people should keep in mind, maybe top of mind, things that they need to be emotionally honest with about self-love? Is it, how does one express one's needs without being selfish? Would be a good way to put that.
Well, if I'm going to say that my needs are more important than anybody else's, I will be selfish. However, if I don't even tell anybody that I have needs, then I'm assuming that nobody needs to take care of me, and that comes from an attitude of not respecting myself, not valuing myself, not loving myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is that my cup will be empty before long, and I'll have nothing to give. If I try to give out of an empty cup, I can do that for a short amount of time, but sooner or later, I will run myself into a depression,
mm-hmm.
or I will run myself into anxiety, or I will run myself into wishing that I was a hermit.
Yeah.
And in order to, it talks about also in 2 Corinthians, how there needs to be whoever has gives and whoever doesn't have receives. Just that balance of giving and receiving.
Mm-hmm.
You can think of it even as a 50-50 kind of balance.
Yeah, in Galatians it talks about bearing one another's burdens. It's not just
and thus fulfilling the law of Christ.
Yeah, not a singular one-sided thing. It's more of a loving dynamic
mm-hmm. that
actually requires, because vulnerability is a point where I express my needs. And if I'm never vulnerable, that's not true. That's not a true relationship.
It's not being honest, and it's not being real. It's not being in touch with the real me, or letting that person know who the real me is.
So the difference is between expressing my needs in a demanding way and expressing my needs in a open way. That would be
huge.
Healthy. Yeah.
It's very huge. A demanding expression would be all about me, and the person is just selfish, and the person is aggressive, just very childish, perhaps, or manipulative. And that is sin, of course, because it's not love.
Mm-hmm.
But to not talk about my own needs is trying to pretend like I don't have any, and that's not treating myself like who I am.
How do you manage that
mm-hmm.
that dynamic? Because I'm sure you see couples or individuals come in and there's kind of a scorekeeping. Well, I did this and this, and they never. How do you avoid that kind of they never scorekeeping while still expressing your needs in a healthy way and hearing the other person's needs and being able to say no?
People who are willing to love their neighbor as they love themselves, to do it sort of in a 50-50 kind of way,
uh-huh.
those people are understanding what Christ meant when he said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And of course you're not perfect. Of course you're going to have needs. People who don't want to admit that they've got needs are just sort of setting the stage for themselves to run out of energy and want to isolate or be resentful. A lot of times people who have done all the giving then find themselves in an empty spot, and they just want to lash out at people, or they want to assume that people are selfish, or they want to mind read and call people.
I also read another book recently that sort of put that giver as actually in a kind of a controlling position. Sometimes they want the other person to sort of assume the one down and just sort of be their audience, and have this sort of codependent relationship with the I'll give, you'll like it, and that's the way things will be.
Yeah, and I think of codependence as when I'm allowing somebody to not do what's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm allowing them to be all about self or be
Mm-hmm.
Sinful in certain ways. And it's not honoring to the Lord, it's not honoring to themselves, and it's not honoring to the people around them.
Yeah. So, how would you describe a process of like negotiating that? How does that look like when I speak about my needs? And is it important to understand the needs beyond just maybe the physical tacit thing? Like to get to the real emotional need? Do you find that people get kind of conflicted on the surface level and don't see what they really want?
A lot of times people have been trained to not listen to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times they think of their needs as water, food, warm clothes in the winter, shoes, but they don't understand that needs also refer to emotional needs. Like, I do need security, I do need some attention, I do need some control, I do need some acceptance, I do need some purpose, various things like that. And if I don't have those, I'm going to feel bad, and then at some point I will overreact to those bad feelings, and I might isolate, or I might be mad at somebody and lash out at them, or I might try to get manipulative or controlling. I'll do something to try to get some of those needs met. And if I don't just even identify what it is, I won't know what I need to do.
Do people get stuck on an emotional level? Like they get stuck in a certain emotion and just say, well, this is what I'm feeling, when really there's something they really are feeling underneath that?
A lot of times they get stuck in anger and just doing something to release the anger. But underneath the anger, there's always something at a deeper level. It could be that I feel hurt. Maybe I feel left out. Maybe I feel helpless.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I feel rejected. Maybe I feel not wanted. There's some emotion under the anger. The only exception to that would be righteous anger, where the person around me is sinning.
Yeah, doing something evil. But
yeah, and I'm angry like God would be angry, only obviously on a minor scale.
Yeah. So how does that work out when someone has that kind of that anger and finds that, because sometimes anger you think of it's pushing someone else away with loud words or like statements that are kind of engineered to hurt.
Maybe to demean or
the irony is underneath what they're really wanting is to love and be connected with the person. So why does someone, use that anger to sort of like, cause disturbance in a relationship when really they want to connect?
Well, a lot of times, whatever the person is doing in response to their anger, they might isolate.
Okay.
Or they might
like shut down and be quiet.
Right, or leave. Or they might yell, or they might hit, or they might get drunk. They're going to do something that they have learned gets them out of, or takes care of that anger, but they're ignoring what the underlying emotional need is. Maybe if I've felt left out, I'll feel hurt, and I'll just feel irritated, and I'll just go home. Well, what if I had just said, does anybody want to hear my voice? Or, John, can I talk to you about this? I want somebody to hear what I have to say, or I want to know what I have to say about this, and it'll help if I can talk about it with somebody. Would you have time to listen to me? I could ask for what I want. And a lot of times we have learned that that's selfish. So isn't it also selfish just to get ticked and go home? That would be another version of selfishness.
So what do people do with their feelings if they ask whomever they're in relationship with and the other person says, no, I don't want to do that?
Well, they have the right.
What do they do with that?
They have the right to have whatever reaction they want to have, and I must respect their right, because their emotional needs are equally important with mine, so I can still then go to find somebody else who would be willing
that
to
sometimes
listen to me.
Become difficult, like in a spousal relationship where you're asking, you don't feel like your needs are being met. At what point do you feel like, oh, this is unloving? Is that, there's probably no line, but what do you do with that? I mean,
if I feel like I'm being unloving,
Or if your spouse is being unloving, So
if I feel like my spouse is being unloving, I could say, maybe this isn't a good time for you. I know that this might not be a good time for you. Is there a better time when we could talk about this? Because I really would like for you to hear what I have to say about that. I can respect my spouse's need, and I can ask him to respect my need. It's like both are important, and sometimes a person has immediate, hard impressions of needs, and if somebody feels desperate for something, that's different than if somebody feels like they would like something.
Yeah.
And so the desperate needs obviously are more of a priority for the moment, at the moment. But it doesn't mean that the other needs are also not important at some point.
You're never really going to get a perfect meshing of my desires and needs. I mean, men, women are always different. Even friendships are different. Like I want to have this level of friendship, and you don't, and so.
Right.
We can't always mesh our expectations. So there's always going to be some dissonance there, I think, in every relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And that person's needs matter, and my needs matter. And how can we have a mutually beneficial relationship? If I try to just ignore my needs and just try to love you, well, sooner or later I'll recognize that I'm going to have to go someplace else to have my needs valued and respected. I might have to isolate and just be by myself for a while. If in order to love my neighbor as I love myself, I'm going to have to use my voice.
Yeah, but it's important to have not just one, but a lot of healthy relationships, so that on different levels you can,
Right.
Because not every relationship will be able to supply all your needs,
absolutely,
wants, and
right.
That you have more options to go to other relationships to.
Absolutely, and that's why
your cup filled when you need it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why the Lord put us together as the body of Christ. There are these needs in this person, and these gifts, and these needs in this person, and these gifts, and somehow they just mesh together. And it's not going to be perfect until we're in heaven.
Yeah.
But it can work well if I value you and your needs, and you value me and my needs. If I value my needs and you value your needs, then, yeah, because we can't read each other's minds.
Yeah. So how does compassion kind of play into that aspect of a relationship, of being able to be compassionate towards someone else's, like, I don't have the ability to fulfill that need, versus, like you said, anger. How do you see people who respond in those different ways?
Anger usually is a coping mechanism to either get control or to stand up for myself in a blunt way, or it's an effort to meet one of my needs. The problem is that a lot of times I'll meet one of my needs, but then at the same time I'll be giving up others of my needs. Like maybe I need attention, so I can yell at you,
yeah,
and I can get your attention, but I probably won't get your respect or your acceptance or
the real relationship that I'm desiring.
Exactly, or connection with you. Yeah. And so I might get your attention for the moment, but it could definitely work against me in the long run. It's interesting that we were usually taught the self-defeating coping mechanisms by our families of origin. They were taught them by their parents and by their families of origin. And they passed them on to us. And if we're not on top of it, we'll pass them on to our kids.
Yeah.
If we had had a wonderful set of parents, that would have meant their parents were probably pretty darn good. And it's like good gets passed on and rottenness gets passed on.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so our challenge is to do whatever we can with what we've been given, and to figure out how can I even add to that to give to my kids.
So are there some good language or good styles of doing that sort of dance of saying, this is what my need is, and this is what my need is? And are there times like to just set that whole conversation aside when things get too inflamed? So what are some good techniques for being able to say, hey, I need this, or how come you're not providing this for me when I've asked before?
There are some really good sources of reference for this. One really good book on the topic is A Lasting Promise.
Okay.
Scott Stanley is the first author there.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things they suggest is when anger starts to kick in, call a timeout before it goes really bad. Because the further bad it goes, the harder it'll be to come back to where we can actually talk about this. You know, if anger starts to kick in, then go ahead. Either person could call a timeout. What is helpful is if they have agreed on when we call a timeout, what's the maximum length of time it needs to be. Maybe within 5 minutes I'll be okay and I can come back to it. Or maybe it'll take me 3 hours.
Yeah, or 3 hours.
Yeah. Maybe it would take me as long as a day. But whatever it is, the maximum length, it needs to be
Sort of decided ahead of time is helpful.
exactly agreed upon ahead of time. And so one of the rules would be whoever calls the timeout also agrees to call the time in no longer than the maximum length of time that we have agreed on. And it's interesting that
So it's kind of a foundational thing you'd set in a relationship.
yeah,
So you can argue well.
exactly. And the arguing doesn't go south
Yeah.
too bad,
Yeah.
so that you can't
You can stop
get back.
yourself before the momentum is
Exactly.
crashing over the
Yeah.
hill.
And it's interesting, in this book they describe that anywhere you've got men in charge of something, they have set rules to guide conflict. Law, war, sports.
Yeah.
You know, anytime men have been in charge, they set rules to guide the conflict. That's what guys like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, especially they talk about this in relation to the marital situation. But it's helpful for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, rules guide conflict.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go too far south. It's not going to be too destructive before we come back and we resolve it.
Is there an open-handed way to ask for your needs too? I mean, is it a mentality, or is it like something you can do verbally, like these are my wants and needs, and just be clear about it so that it's not like vague?
Absolutely, and that needs to be something that the couple has agreed upon ahead of time, that they want to respect each other's needs. My needs are just as important as yours. Yours are just as important as mine. We want this to be a both and. We don't want it to be a either you or me situation, because that would go south pretty fast. So if we know that it's going to be, yeah, both of us matter here equally. Your needs matter, my needs matter, emotional needs, physical needs, spiritual needs, all of them. Then, yeah, I want to know what yours are. If you feel like your needs are not being well met, please let me know, because you're a priority to me. And I would want you also to want to hear what my needs are, because I would like to be a priority to you. It's like, yeah, love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah. You were telling me about the needs concept. Is there something on there that was helpful, that was...
Yeah, this needs and defenses is a little worksheet that I put together when I was starting my counseling practice. And basically, yeah, emotional needs, and I describe them as universal emotional needs, because men have them, women have them, old people have them, young people have them. You know, they were there in the 2nd century, they're going to be there in the 35th century.
People sometimes have a hard time even articulating what they want.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have a great emotional vocabulary.
Exactly. And we don't usually get trained as kids to even think about what are my emotional needs.
Yeah.
We also don't think about what are the feelings that point to the emotional needs. Like if I feel ignored, that's pointing to my need for attention.
Yeah.
Or if I
Respect,
feel,
yeah.
if I feel rejected, that's pointing to my need for acceptance. If I feel hurt, maybe that would be pointing to my need for comfort, or perhaps security. And so the more we listen to our feelings, the deeper feelings, then the better we're going to understand what our emotional needs are, and I'll know how to ask for what I need. And then when I know what my need is, and I know how to ask for it, I won't have to do some self-defeating coping mechanism like run.
Or passive aggressive, or whatever
Or
strategy.
lash out.
Because that doesn't
Right.
bring clarity to a situation. That usually is like another smokescreen layer that just confuses a relationship
Exactly.
further.
And a lot of coping mechanisms or coping strategies, a lot of them are self-defeating.
Yeah.
In other words, they work on one level, okay, I'll get the attention if I yell at you.
Yeah.
But then on the
You
underneath,
break relationship on the other hand.
yeah, and I might get your attention, but then you're going to leave as soon as you
Yeah.
can. So then I don't have connection anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been self-defeating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if I do some kind of a healthy coping mechanism, I won't be self-defeating.
Uh-huh.
And, if the person can't meet my need right then I need to respect that, because
Mm-hmm.
their needs are equally important with mine.
Yeah.
But I would want them to let me know what they would like as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then if one of us, like if one person's bleeding and the other person is sleepy, okay, the bleeding is more of a priority immediately
Yeah.
than the
Yeah.
needing a nap.
Yeah.
But both are important.
Mm-hmm.
If I help this person who's bleeding, then
Yeah.
they could let me take a nap.
Does time, is it a sort of a good skill to be able to hold things in tension for a good period of time if you don't come up with that creative solution on how to meet each other's needs specifically?
Well, it would be perfectly okay to say, let's call a little time out here, especially if we had already agreed on the maximum length for the timeout. We don't want there to be a disunity. If we want the relationship to persist, we don't want to lose connection. But if there's something that we can't figure out at the moment, maybe one of us or both of us need to go find somebody to give us some counsel about this. I'm having this problem. Would you give me an idea as to what I might try differently about this?
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody just needs to sleep. Maybe it's late at night and they just need to rest. Forgiveness is a big deal. To forgive someone is something that I do. I actually have a worksheet on that. Do you want to have
Sure.
me get that out? It's under F.
Under F.
Those are listed alphabetically.
There's D.
Forgiveness is a big deal.
I have the whole forgiveness file here. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah, forgiveness is something that is a big deal. It's got to do with basically what it is and what it's not. Forgiveness is something that I do as a decision. It's not a feeling.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a feeling. I might still feel somewhat angry even after I've decided to forgive, and the anger will go away with time. But it's choosing to let go of the anger, and it's not necessarily going to be trust. It's for my benefit that I'm going to forgive. It's not for the other person's benefit. I don't want to wear that for the rest of my life.
Do you have to even tell the other person that you're forgiven them?
The person might not even still be in this world. No, you don't have to say it in order to do it. You choose to let go of the anger, and basically it's something inside of me that it's not necessarily something between me and that person. And it's a decision that I have to renew as needed.
Yeah.
If they hurt me again, I have to forgive again. Or if I remember it again and I'm musing on it, then I need to forgive again.
Yeah.
It's something that's not a once for all time thing. It's not trusting, but it's choosing.
More of a state of mind than an event.
Letting go of that anger. If I take it back, then I have to let go of it again. It's recognizing that God alone is the judge.
Okay.
And I need to put whatever that is that I've been hurt by. I don't know why the person even did it, but I need to put that in God's court and just recognize that God is the one who will judge.
What happens to us if we don't relinquish that? What happens
And
in our hearts and our minds?
We just wear it.
Yeah.
for the rest of our lives, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it will irritate us. It will make our anger level boost it up, and then just a little more anger will maybe bump me over the top.
Yeah.
And so it's like I always have this little irritation
Yeah.
that I'm irritated
I can
with
remember
life.
when I was in my 20s, I had an individual I was so angry with, I actually would shake
Yes.
when I was talking about that person. And
exactly.
eventually I came to the point, it's like, if I don't let this go, this is going to kill me. Or just like, it's going to make me, just drag me down.
And the truth is, the hurt is over.
Mm-hmm.
And if I wear it for the rest of my life, what's that doing to that person?
When I was wearing it, thinking that anger was righteous and good, and I was probably justified in being, I was hurt. And sort of like, it was like I didn't want to let go of the hurt because it seemed not fair.
Well, and it probably wasn't fair.
Uh-huh.
And that's God's job, to judge and to do whatever needs to be done there, not your job. So why wear that for the rest of your life and just wear yourself down?
Yeah.
And basically, you only can control what you can control.
Exactly.
And you couldn't control that, so why waste your energy and why waste your time focusing on it?
It was quite freeing once I let go. And it did take time, because those thoughts would continuously come back, those hurts would come back, and I had to sort of decide, like, no, I want to live in that forgiveness. No.
Yeah, forgiveness is about defining myself in the here and now. I can't change the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so letting that be God's job, defining myself in the here and now, and not wearing that for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about reclaiming dignity and respect for myself, not just letting that define me.
Can that go all the way to compassion at times too?
It can. It can. You could feel compassion for somebody who had done evil toward you. It wouldn't be the same as trusting them.
No.
Of course.
I mean, you might have compassion that they would be able to realize and become a whole person and reform and
you
live
could
a real
want
life.
that. Yeah, you could want that for them, but will that happen? That's between them and that person.
Yeah.
That's between them and God.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't want to define myself by whatever the nasty thing was that I was hurt by. And so, just recognizing that forgiveness is a choice, and it's up to me if I'm going to do it or not.
Okay.
And the Lord says, do it. He says, you've been forgiven, you forgive.
And these two things that we talked about, like talking about needs and forgiveness, are kind of relate to each other, because like when I ask for a needs and you say yes, and then you don't, you know, I have to decide, well, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to keep score?
Does she even remember?
Yeah. Am I going to let this go? You know, and then taking that to the other level of trust is very important too. To not just think, oh, it's a virtue to just allow myself to be misused. You know, God eventually wants us to say, no, you're not a trustworthy person. So, unsafe people. How do we, and boundaries. That seems to be, you know, a relationship ender, but is it? You know,
not necessarily. It depends. Does that person even know that they hurt me? We can't read their mind.
Yeah.
Do they know that they hurt me? Do they know why they hurt me? You know, just opening things up, maybe deciding on when we're going to talk about it. Could we talk about it?
Are they safe enough to even talk about it?
That would be a big issue.
Yeah.
And if they are, then we could agree on a time, and we could, you know, take it slow. And if it starts to go south, we can say, maybe we should wait and come back to this when we've done a little more
So you're not
thinking.
maybe in a spousal relationship with somebody. It could be someone in your family or a friend. How are there indicators that you find that, you know, the person's just not open to relationship and not desiring a relationship, so that would be kind of harmful to yourself to trust them with, you know, feelings, thoughts, emotions?
Yes, you know, eventually with time, does that person want to open up with me? If I ask them a question, will they answer me? If they hurt me, do they care? They might say that they care. Do they show that they care? Can I tell?
Is it wrong of us not to repair every relationship?
It is not wrong. We cannot repair every relationship. I can only do what I can do, and I can't make that person do what I want them to do or what I think they should do, they're going to choose what they're going to do. I can give feedback.
Yeah.
Will they receive it? Maybe, maybe
Yeah.
not. I
Yeah.
can't make them. They couldn't make me receive it.
Yeah.
That person may not even know how they've hurt me.
Yeah.
Are they open to that? If they want to create mutually beneficial relationship, a love relationship between us, then yes, they will care if they've hurt me. And they may have no idea that they've hurt me. And I can be open. I can say, you know, I'm not going to judge your motive here because I don't know why you did this. But when you did this, this is how I was hurt. You know, and I just wanted to be sure that we keep connected. And that person's going to decide how they respond.
So a healthy relationship, and that, you know, according to what we've kind of been discussing tonight, how would you characterize it in like three or four sentences or so in terms of like what we talked about in terms of needs, forgiveness, trust?
Well, basically, a healthy relationship, both people recognize that they individually matter and the
relationship matters.
Yeah, that person's needs are just as important as mine. Mine are just as important as that person's. And we both recognize that, and we both want to pursue
Creative fulfillment of both of those.
what's going to be good for both of us. Yeah, and it may not happen at the same time. Maybe I'll help that person before, or maybe they'll help me before. But both of us are equally important.
Yeah.
And that's essential for a mutually beneficial relationship.
And relationships need to have safety and trust and all of that, and
Right.
and so we need to. Is it important to be able to allow a relationship to have that? You can't force someone, and that you find that forcing is a lot of the frustration that people experience in relationships, rather than just allowing it to be where it is going to be naturally, and then.
Yeah, respecting each other's choices is huge. You know, it might be the parent respecting the child's choice. If they're under the parent's authority, that's one thing. But if they have gone beyond,
We can't force our children to be close with us
we cannot.
and trusting us.
We
If
cannot. We have to respect whatever that person controls.
Yeah.
If I'm in control of something, then it's my responsibility. But if I can't control it, then it's somebody else's responsibility. And I might or might not trust that person. But like if my 16-year-old wants to put booze in his car, then if I find it, I can take the keys if the car's in my name.
Yeah.
But if they're 26 when they do it, then
Yeah, that's their responsibility. And their
I won't give them money if I know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But I definitely need to respect what choices I don't have control of, even if I don't like them.
Yeah, that's difficult, isn't it?
Right.
To be able to allow others to be who they are.
And yet that's the way God made us. And God, I do believe that it's part of being in the image of God for Him to have given us choice, and He lets us make our choices. And He will respect our choices, and there will be consequences if they're bad choices. And we must do that with other people. We must respect their choices, even if they're bad. And it'll make us sad if we love the person, if we see them making bad choices. But God gave us the right to choose, and we can't take that away from someone without it being a control thing. If they're my little ones, you know, if they're 6 and they're doing something nasty, I can take control of that. But I can't make them want what I want them to want.
Yeah, there's different levels, different types of relationships.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Susan. Thanks for chatting with me about relationships, and we a very important part of our world. And
Absolutely. And a lot of us grew up not understanding how relationships are important and what it takes to have a good, solid, mutually beneficial relationship.
it takes a lot of work.
And that's why there's so many divorces in our world, because people just give up.
But it's worth working.
And there are ways to make it happen.
All right. Well, thanks, Susan.
You're welcome.